Most of the Magid section of the Haggadah comes from Sefer Shemot and other parts of the Chumash, but one important passage is taken from the Navi, the last chapter in Sefer Yehoshua, chapter 24, verses 2, 3, and 4, where Yehoshua addresses the people shortly before his death. For time's sake, I will read the passage only in English. And Yehoshua said to all of the people, "So says Hashem, the God of Israel, of old, your ancestors dwelt beyond the river, Terach, the father of Avraham, and the father of Nahor, and they worshipped other gods. And I took your father Avraham from beyond the river, and I led him throughout all the land of Canaan, and I multiplied his seed, and I gave Yitzchak unto him. And I gave Yaakov and Esav unto Yitzchak, and I gave unto Esav Mount Seir to inherit. And Yaakov and his sons went down to Egypt." First, some background. Yehoshua, as well as Moshe and David HaMelech, speak to the people shortly before their deaths. Why did they choose that moment to give their addresses? Rav Yehuda Leib Ginsburg, in his commentary Musar HaNevi'im, cites the Midrash Yalkut Shimoni. One reason is that a dying person will never repeat himself. The uniqueness of the message gives it greater impact. Now, let's address some questions. First, why quote Yehoshua in particular in the Haggadah? Second, why do we say these specific verses on Seder night? Why were they included? And third, why mention Esav at this point? For our first question, why quote Yehoshua? Although often underappreciated, Yehoshua served not only as Moshe's able and devoted assistant, his misharet. He is also called Eved Hashem, the servant of God at his death. Moshe and Yehoshua are the only people to receive this highest spiritual appellation after their passing. Also, Yehoshua serves as a vital link between life under slavery in Mitzrayim and living a free life in Canaan. And further, Yehoshua accomplished with God's help the seemingly insurmountable goals of leading the battle in defeating Amalek in the desert, fighting God's battles in conquering most of the 7 nations upon Bnei Israel's entry into Eretz Canaan, apportioning the land among the tribes, and establishing regulations that enabled the people to live in the land, all while encouraging the people to remain loyal to God and his Torah. With these accomplishments, Yehoshua certainly merits being quoted in the Haggadah. Addressing our second question, why these verses? Masechet Psachim 116a tells us it is important to start with Genai, disgrace, and then end with Shevach, praise. Malbim notes that these verses indicate that our ancestors were not worthy of receiving Hashem's divine providence and prophecy. Parsing Yehoshua's words, Malbim explains that Yehoshua cites the following problematic issues and then Hashem's solutions in preparation for his future permanent bond with the people. Geography, ancestry, and idolatry. Geography, Aver HaNahar, beyond the river, refers to the Euphrates River. Idolatry permeated the environment there and was compared to bad soil containing one beautiful plant, Avraham. So Hashem had to transplant Avraham to the rich, beautiful soil of Eretz Canaan. Ralbag points out that Hashem then led Avraham all over Eretz Canaan to teach the land's perfection to all who were ready to accept it. Ancestry. Avraham had Terach at his head and his brother Nahor at his side. Both were very negative influences. To counteract these evils, Hashem blessed Avraham with Yitzchak and his descendants. And these specific words about Terach are included in the Haggadah, since this is the only place in the Tanakh where Terach is mentioned as a negative ancestor. Avodah Zarah, contamination by idolatry. Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein, in his commentary Baruch She'amar, notes that our ancestors who lived near the Euphrates River were idolaters for generations. Idolatry was rooted in Israel's blood and soul. A harsh slavery period in Egypt was necessary to purify Israel of idolatry. This purification continued through Egypt, through the sojourn in the desert, and was only accomplished when they marched and reached the border with Yehoshua upon entering Eretz Canaan. Thus, these verses concisely provide important background to the story of the Exodus. And now, for our third question, why mention Esav at this point? Metzudat David and other commentaries note that Esav and his people must inherit and live in Har Seir and not descend to Mitzrayim. Only Yaakov and his family descend to Mitzrayim. The people of Esav then cannot claim to be the ones that Hashem has chosen to become purified as his nation via the iron crucible, the Kur HaBarzel of Egypt. They cannot claim to be the descendants of Yitzchak, and the descendants of Esav can never claim to have a stake in the land of Israel. Now, if we examine the continuation of Yehoshua's valedictory in chapter 24, which is not quoted in the Haggadah, Yehoshua emphasizes all of the good, the chesed, that Hashem has done for his people, and the close, inseparable bond that they share. Yehoshua stresses that this bond reflects the critical importance of following Hashem's Torah. So Yehoshua scathingly rebukes polytheistic dualism and states, Hashem is the only God. According to Rashi, Yehoshua is concerned because he sees through Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, that over 600 years later, in the time of Yechezkel Hanavi, chapter 20, verses 30 through 38, how the people reject Hashem and how God then angrily responds. Abarbanel points out that Yehoshua's intent is that people must not only remove their actions of idol worship, they must also eradicate any thoughts of it that they might entertain. Malbim goes on to say that Yehoshua exhorts the people to make a rational, conscious decision to want to serve God, not a self-serving emotional decision based on their desire for reward or fear of punishment. After listening to Yehoshua's address, the people emphatically and enthusiastically affirmed their loyalty to Hashem, thereby renewing God's covenant with the people at Sinai. Thus, Yehoshua speaks with facts and emotion, starting with the disgraceful values of Terach beyond the Euphrates River and mirroring the Haggadah's conclusion, ending on a praiseworthy note at the time of his own death. In summary, some lessons we can learn from the verses quoting Yehoshua. 1. Rabbi Chaim Dov Rabinovich, in his commentary Da'at Sofrim, tells us that these verses from Yehoshua are placed in the Haggadah to remind us that based on our history, we do not have reason to be proud about our accomplishments. Rather, any and all greatness that we experience comes from God. 2. We learn from Yehoshua's words that Hashem gave us the opportunity to become his people via the harsh slavery in Egypt. 3. We, not the descendants of Esav, are Hashem's people. 4. We must learn from Yehoshua the critical importance of total singular loyalty to Hashem. And his words have the greatest impact since they are said just prior to his death. Finally, the reference to Yehoshua provides a link to the Haggadah in Dayenu, when we thank God not only for taking us out of Egypt, but also for bringing us into the land of Israel. May we learn from our history so that we can improve for the future. And may we all have a meaningful and beautiful Pesach. My family and I wish you and yours a Chag Kasher V'Sameach. Thank you.